Nintendo finally unveiled a lengthy, continuous demo for Metroid Prime 4 Beyond at the recent Switch 2 Treehouse event, and it looks incredible. The Switch 2 version was shown running in crisp 4K resolution at 60 frames per second, which almost made it hard to believe the core of this game is still a Switch 1 title. Like many others, I'm curious how many other graphical enhancements were added to this Switch 2 version, such as higher resolution textures or additional effects and environmental details. Obviously, we won't know for sure until we can see the same segment on Switch 1 and run some comparisons. However, while most people seem to be caught up in comparisons to the Switch 1 version or even Metroid Prime Remastered, there's one other graphical comparison that kept running through my mind while watching this demo, and that was for Metroid Prime 3, which released all the way back in 2007 on the Wii. Now, the main reason I couldn't stop thinking about Prime 3 during this demo, aside from the obvious graphical leap, is that the pacing, certain gameplay segments, and even certain camera shots are extremely close to the first hour of the previous Prime game, and I think it also makes the most sense to compare Prime 4 to the last entry in the series. So I decided to sit down and create an actual comparison between these two and examine just how far this series has come. I think Prime 4 is an astounding leap over Prime 3, especially when you consider it was primarily designed for the now ancient Switch hardware. Obviously, this Switch 2 version adds a beautiful coat of polish onto the game, which made me wonder what a Prime 5 built from the ground up exclusive for Switch 2 might look like, but I digress. So let's look at some comparisons here. For context, Prime 3 is captured using an original Wii disc copy of the game, though here it's running on the legendary Wii U's backwards compatibility mode, which provides a nice way to capture Wii games via its HDMI output. In Prime 3, there are a few shots of Samus flying past the fleet of Federation ships in the beginning, like we see here. There's a decent scope and level of detail on display relative to the hardware. At the time, Prime 3 provided the most expansive look into the wider Federation when compared to previous Metroid titles. However, when we compare that to this descending shot in Prime 4, the difference is massive. The opening cutscene of the Prime 4 demo is truly impressive. In fact, I would argue the cinematics in this demo look loosely current gen and comparable to games we see on competing systems, which is usually a rarity with Nintendo games. The Prime 4 shots here look almost film quality in comparison. There's just so much detail and so much going on. These cutscenes appear to be pre-rendered using enhanced game assets. I'm not sure of the exact details there, but the fact that they seamlessly still blend with the gameplay is a testament to the overall visual quality of the gameplay. One of my favorite shots from both Prime 3 and 4 is when Samus is first landing on the planet to assist the Federation troops. This fly-in shot from Prime 3 looks decent for the time, with some great building music and a decent look at the ongoing battle across the base, even if the scope is a bit limited. Eventually Samus lands and descends from her ship, and we get a good look at her suit as she approaches a Federation soldier. However, the scale and detail of this type of scene is massively increased in Prime 4. The Federation base is shown in its full size and scope, and it looks super impressive. I think this shot here is so cool looking. I love the cinematic camera angles as Samus calculates her landing. In Prime 4, Samus more traditionally emerges from the top of her ship and leaps down onto the planet. I think her suit looks beautiful here in Prime 4. The awesome metal materials look vastly improved over Prime 3's more plasticky look, obviously due to technical limitations. As a side note, the red suit we saw in the second Prime 4 trailer only further reassures us that there will be great-looking power-ups in this game. One of my favorite shots in the Prime 4 demo is when these Federation soldiers are running towards a mech suit for more firepower. This scene looks so natural and cinematic, and the visual fidelity is beyond anything we've seen from a core Nintendo franchise, in my opinion. The Federation trooper climbs into the mech and immediately starts to battle until Samus swoops in to save the day. Prime 3 doesn't necessarily have a one-to-one match for this scene, but we do have this mech scene with the bounty hunter Gore when he's reintroduced battling an enemy. I actually think this is one of the most awkward scenes in Prime 3. I always thought Gore had kind of a poor design, and the animation flow of this scene just looks really odd to me. Another great shot in Prime 4 is when Samus enters the Federation base and interacts with a Federation trooper. Although simple, this scene again just looks so organic and high quality. The lighting and materials look top-notch, the voice acting is decent, and the poses and animations of these two characters look very natural. I think it's interesting that you can't see Samus's face at all through the visor. I'm curious to see how this visor design evolves throughout the game, since you could often see her face somewhat in the previous entries. Prime 3's Federation soldiers look fine for the hardware, but the game tends to pan the camera in on the soldiers and not show Samus while she's talking to them. This creates sort of a stiff presentation that doesn't feel as organic. More notably though, the suit design and visual quality between Prime 3 and Prime 4 is just enormous. I mean, look at the difference in materials, lighting, posture, and so on. It's just huge. Prime 3 and 4 have a number of scenes where space pirates fly or crash onto the scene and start attacking soldiers. For example, Prime 3 has this scene where space pirates show up and start shooting at the Federation troopers. I think this scene is also presented a bit strangely. There's just a few soldiers standing about 10 feet apart, and yet they can't hit each other. The Federation soldier eventually activates his suit power-up and destroys the space pirates. I know I am being slightly harsh on Prime 3 here. If you watch my channel, you'll know it's not my favorite Metroid. I do think it's a solid effort for the Wii with some great segments, but I also think the attempt at a more cinematic presentation was too ambitious for the hardware, and it hasn't aged all that well in comparison to the first two games. Anyway, Prime 4 has a somewhat similar scene where space pirates show up, but instead of a suit power-up, a giant Federation mech arrives on the scene and starts destroying things. The scale and polish of this scene just looks crazy in comparison. There's much more going on, and all of it is way more detailed. Retro seems to really be amping up the scope of scenes like this. There's also a few great morph ball shots in both games. Here we can see Samus in Prime 3 rolling down some tubes while the pirates and Federation soldiers battle each other above. I always enjoy when Metroid games sort of pull the camera out while you're in morph ball mode to show you the wider context as you secretly roll through the environment. Prime 4 features a similar shot where Samus rolls past some battling troops, though this time they're placed beneath her, and there's of course way more going on. You can see the Federation soldiers hauling away the artifact while the pirates attack. Both scenes even include getting an energy tank, one of many parallels. Prime 3 and 4 also both feature targeting switches early on, where the player must fire at glowing spots to calibrate or test their precision shooting. It's interesting that Prime 3 was motion control based, and now Prime 4 has a sort of mouse control. I'll be interested to see which one feels more natural. For the most part though, I'm sure I'll stick with dual analog controls. We can also see plenty of sequences throughout both openings where Samus is helping the Federation soldiers battle rooms full of space pirate enemies as she moves forward with her own objective. In Prime 3, we see a lot of this before she lands on the planet. In Prime 4, this is dialed way up in terms of the amount of chaos and detail in the scene. I particularly like this part where Samus is assisting with a battle in a research lab of sorts. There's all kinds of detail going on here if you pause to look around. I also think the space pirates in general are looking better and more natural than they were in the very early reveal we saw last year for Prime 4. I'm not sure if these are Switch 2 enhancements or just more polish over time, or a bit of both. Now there's two final comparisons I want to look at, and the first deals with boss fights. Prime 3 and 4 actually have a very similar boss fight early in the game. The boss fight in Prime 3 involves using precision aiming to shatter the glowing orbs on the boss and then deflect balls of energy back to shatter its shell. Eventually Samus is able to hit the exposed weak spot. This enemy looks fine for a Wii game, but it is noticeably a bit blurry or lacks a lot of detailed definition, particularly when the head is shown up close here. The boss in Prime 4 is sort of similar in design actually. Samus has to precision target various spheres on its body to shatter them and expose a vulnerable weak point while dodging energy blasts. However, the level of detail on this creature is significantly higher than what we saw in Prime 4, especially if we look at a side-by-side example here. Prime 3 and 4 also have scenes where a competing bounty hunter shows up on the scene of a big explosion. In Prime 3, Rundus assists Samus by taking out enemy ships in a giant ball of fire and lands on the scene. At this point in the game, Rundus is still an ally of Samus though. In Prime 4, after Samus defeats the boss, a giant explosion tears open the wall of the chamber and Sylux emerges with Metroids in tow. I think Sylux and Rundus actually look sort of similar in terms of design, but we can see just how much more detail Sylux has in Metroid Prime 4. We again have much more dramatic lighting, better materials, better camera work, and so on. Obviously Prime 4 is a much more technologically advanced game than Prime 3, but I hope this video clearly demonstrates just how far the franchise has come. I think for a while, people were sort of dismissive of Prime 4 in terms of its presentation, since it was presumably stuck on last gen hardware with the Switch. However, the Switch 2 demo has clearly shown that this will still be an amazing looking game, and that the Switch 2 version might be a more significant upgrade from Switch 1 than many assumed, though obviously we'll have to wait for a side by side comparison to be sure. So, what are your thoughts on the graphics of Prime 4? Did this demo blow you away? Were you expecting this level of polish and scope in the presentation? Was anything about this disappointing to you? What are your hopes for the rest of this game? Please hit those subscribe and like buttons, leave a comment, and let's discuss.